I'm going to open this video with a disclaimer. I am not a metalworker by trade. I have no background in this. I have no experience. I have a welder. I have certain metal fabrication tools, but that doesn't mean that I'm a fabricator or a welder. I just enjoy taking perfectly good material and turning it into something that may or may not be perfectly good material when I'm done with it. So don't try and take this video as a hardcore tutorial on this is the way to do things. This may not even be the right way to do things. What I know is that this is how I've done it on 2 other kits, and they turned out reasonably successful so far, so I just figured while I was doing it, I'd put it up there. Enjoy. Start out scribing a center line down the flat stock, then take the 3D printed diamond, center it, and get the correct angle. The 3D printed diamond is smaller than the one I'm actually making, so I've got to kind of square out the lines a little bit. I trace the 3D printed diamond and then use a steel square to connect the lines so that I've got a nice accurate diamond shape. Then I cut it in half. I don't need the whole length then to save a little bit of aluminum. Really all I need is about 2/3 of the thing, and then I leave the other section flat. File it down. I don't want to use a sander or anything real aggressive. This thing's pretty square right now, and I'll probably just mess it up if I try and sand it and grind it. I then use a pair of metal shears and start cutting little notches out of the aluminum where I'm going to bend it over. When I start to bend it, the edges, the corners and stuff like that will warp real badly if you don't notch it. The previous chest diamond I made, I welded it. This one I'm just going to kind of back brace it and fill it in with JB Weld and sand it smooth. In the end, it's all going to get painted, so I think it'll produce a nicer, quicker, easier thing, and I'm not really a very good sheet metal TIG welder. I sand all the corners and all the edges nice and smooth, and then bang a piece of aluminum flat and straight. I then take that piece of aluminum and bend it to fit inside the chest diamond to give the adhesive a little backing. Okay, before I get started on the next step, I'm going to use JB Weld and JB Weld Quick for the large majority of this build when it comes to joining any 2 surfaces together. Quick, a little more expensive if I recall correctly, but it works inside of about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. The other stuff requires a little bit more clamping time, and I almost always let it sit overnight. But I'm going to use a combination of the 2 of them to do everything that I did with welding the last time. I mix up 2 equal parts on a little bit of aluminum foil with a scrap piece of aluminum, and then line the inside of the chest diamond with JB Weld, and then stick the reinforcement piece in there. Clamp it all together, and then fill in any of the edges where my darting was less than perfect or left a gap, and this will smooth over pretty nicely. So next I start working on the plates to either side of the chest diamond, using the 1/4 inch bar stock, because that's how much I want to fold this over. I just trace lines on the inside of the armor. Then using my metal shears, I dart all of the places where the angles connect. And I dart them very conservatively so that when I start bending over, I may have to trim a little bit more, but better that than have too much of a hole and you really have to fill it in with JB Weld then. Now this is the hard part and where it takes a little bit of practice. I'm just using the cheap hammer dolly set that I picked up at Harbor Freight. They're inexpensive, they contain 3 or 4 different dollies, and they work really well. Once I've got the chest diamond area squared off, I set it on the duct-taped torso that I use for shaping, and then use a spray can or whatever round area I can. You don't want to try and just bend aluminum. If it creases because you bent it too aggressively, then it makes kind of a mark that's really kind of hard to get rid of. And once I've got the chest piece shaped, I just slowly, patiently, and carefully use a combination of the different dollies to start rounding over the edges a little bit at a time. Don't try and round any one edge all the way over, particularly if you're working a long edge. Start in one corner, work your way down the length, do a little bit at a time, then go back over and do it again. I found it's handy to clamp it to the table if you can. Just keeps things in place while you're working on it. You don't even need a fancy hammer and dolly set. Here, I'm just using the flat stock. Anything hard and flat could be used as a dolly. Now, this one you can see the gaps where I was not careful with my darting. That's not going to be a problem. I will be able to fill those pretty easily a little later on down the line. Clean up the edges with a file and some sandpaper, and then compare the two pieces to make sure that all of the edges line up nicely. And then it's on to the collar. Put it on the dummy, start getting an idea for the bend, and then start giving it a rough shape before I even start rolling the edges. Once I've got it where it sits pretty flat on the duct tape dummy, I dart the edges and then start the same process. I might have mentioned this once before, but when I'm working with hammer and dolly and using it to play with the cosplay stuff, one of the things that I try to be really, really careful about is dolly selection or whatever I'm using for a backing plate, to be careful that it matches the curve of the armor. What I've discovered is if I choose the wrong dolly, I can actually undo a lot of what I've done. So I try to be really, really diligent about keeping the curves on the dolly the same as the curves on the plate I'm working on. And then the same thing with the belly plate. Shape it, get it laying nice and flat, and slowly and carefully start rolling the edges. So I've got all the front torso plates roughly shaped and together. Unfortunately, my son's a little skinnier than I thought he was, and I've got to go through and cut down the width of some of these plates. It's not going to be that big of a deal. One of the reasons why I did not fill the darts on the edges where there were gaps was because I expected that there was going to have to be some changes, and if I'd have filled those with the edges rolled when I bent the metal, it was going to buckle or pop seams. So I just left them like they are for now. When I get them finally shaped, I'll back them with aluminum and fill them in with JB Weld to clean them up. I've got to make a couple of little modifications to the collar. The ab plate is a little tall, but again, I expected the same thing. Not a big deal. That's just a matter of cutting a little bit off the end of it and then rolling it back over again. It should only take me a few minutes.